Hi! Have a nice day everyone. I'm Jaylamor Antalan Gatdula from Bachelor of Elementary Education. The topic for today is talk about the components of weather instruments, and patterns. We experience it every day of our lives and learn to associate them with various weather conditions. As you would have guessed by now, we'll look at the different elements that make up the weather. We will examine what they are, define each component, and also look at the instruments that measure each element. What are the elements of the weather? Weather is nothing more than different elements it is composed of, as well as the way they interact with each to create different atmospheric conditions or weather events. Before we can discuss them in details, we first need to identify what the elements are that make up the weather. 8 primary elements factors drive all weather: temperature, air atmospheric, wind or speed and direction, humidity, precipitation, visibility, clouds, types and cover, and lastly is sunshine duration. We can now look at each one in more details. The first one is temperature. We all know what temperature is. When discussing the weather, this will probably be one of the first topics that came up. It is because we are so sensitive to temperature and quickly become aware of feeling cold and hot. We know what it feels like, but what exactly is temperature? In more practical terms, it means that the particles in the air move or vibrate at a certain speed, which create kinetic energy when the particles start to move rotate around faster. That we call temperature increases. And then when the particles begin to slow down, the temperature also starts to decrease. The thermometer is the instrument used to measure temperature because they come in all shapes and sizes and date all the way back to 1714. The mercury, bimetal, and digital thermometer are the 3 most commonly used instruments for measuring ambient temperature. The second one is air pressure. Air pressure is another essential element of weather, especially when it comes to creating or changing atmospheric conditions. It is also one of the critical variables used to make accurate weather forecasts. Although it may not be invisible, air has weight since it is empty. It is filled with smokeless particles of nitrogen, oxygen, argon, carbon dioxide, and a few other gases. The weight of the particles in the air creates pressure due to the gravitational force of the Earth. Since more air is present above the air close to the ground, air pressure is the highest on the planet's surface and decreases as altitude increases. The barometer is the instrument used to measure air pressure because Evangelista Torricelli developed the first device in 1643. The third one is wind speed direction. The movement of air wind is one of the main driving forces of weather. The majority of major and even extreme weather events like cold, warm, fronts, clouds, thunderstorm, and hurricanes are all driven by wind. The anemometer is the instrument used to measure wind speed, consisting of 3 to 4 half cups on arms rotating around a center axis. You can typically find it on the top of weather station or at an elevated position. A wind vane or weather vane is the instrument used to measure wind direction because it is a flat-shaped object that spins freely on an axis, very often in the shape of a arrow or crocodile. You can also find it on the top of a weather station or highly elevated objects. Fourth is humidity. Humidity is another weather element that cannot be seen but can be felt. It is only plays a big part in weather formation but also direction influences our physical comfort levels. humidity can be challenging to understand and interpret correctly, then you also have to be able to make a clear distinction between absolute and relative humidity. So, the hygrometer is the instrument used to measure wind speed because you also find more than one type of this device like the psychrometer and the resistant hygrometer. 5. Precipitation. There is no argument that water in any of its forms is an absolutely necessity for life on Earth to exist. Because human, animals, and plants need water to grow or stay alive, and precipitation is the only way to replenish the dam rivers, reservoirs, and groundwater on which we rely. Precipitation is primarily the result of evaporation and condensation. So, a rain gauge is the instrument used to measure rainfall. Why? Because it is essentially a measured container that captures rain and measures the amount that falls over a set period of time. 6. Visibility. Visibility may seem like a very unlikely element of weather, but it is especially important when discussing and measuring weather conditions like fog, mist, freezing drizzle, and smog. The importance of the ability to measure this element is often underestimated. It is especially applicable in areas where visibility plays a crucial role, like airports and harbors, where it can literally be a matter of life or death. Visibility sensors like the forward scatter sensors are the instruments used to measure visibility because in the past using your own vision or eyes to measure the degree to which you can observe an object was the standard. 7. Clouds, types and cover. It is no secret that clouds are one of the quickest ways to determine current and future weather conditions. Studying them in more detail with specific equipment is very valuable to make very accurate assessments of present and future atmospheric conditions. Knowing how to identify a certain type of cloud and the weather associated with it can be proved valuable when assessing weather conditions with only by with only visual references. You can all about the different clouds and their characteristics in these articles. Now, the advanced instruments meteorologists use to study clouds in details are weather satellites and radars. Satellites and radar images are able to accurately measure cloud density and the amount of moisture, the temperature, and the movement of the clouds. The last one is sunshine duration. The amount of sunshine the Earth receives, which is a characteristic of solar radiation, greatly influences other elements of the weather like ambient temperature and more indirectly humidity and air pressure. As already stated, sunshine duration influences other weather elements, which can change the whole makeup of the weather condition. This ability makes it a more powerful and influential factor than you may think. Sunshine recorders, more specifically Campbell-Stokes recorders, are the instruments used to record sunshine duration. Because Campbell-Stokes recorders basically consist of a spherical lens that focuses sunlight on a specific type of day to make its measurement. I totally explained the 8 elements that make up the weather, what they are, and which instruments are used to measure each one. Now, let's talk about the weather patterns. What is weather patterns? One of the first things many people do when they wake up in the morning is check the weather. The weather pattern where you live will help you and your parents decide what you should wear or bring to school that day. A weather pattern occurs when the weather stays the same for days or weeks at a time. The patterns of weather are tied to the 4 seasons: summer, winter, spring, and fall. There are few different weather patterns that you may already know about, such as hot and dry, wet and rainy, or cold. This pattern helps us decide whether it's a good day to go to the beach or to stay inside. I hope you learn much better from what I taught today. Until next time, keep your eye on the weather.